Hello! Today we are talking about social media and social judgment theory. Let's go! Before we get started, I do want to take a moment and talk to you about the color key. It occurred to me today that I always use colors to code information in the PowerPoints, but I have not explicitly told you what the colors mean. So in the slides today, any words that are orange are a keyword or a key term. Any words that are green are an important idea that I want to highlight for you. And any words that are in blue are something that you need to do. So you can use that as your code. In each set of slides, I always use the colors consistently. So if you notice that I am highlighting words in particular colors, there typically is going to be some sort of consistent pattern that is along these lines, and you should be able to figure out why I'm using which colors consistently throughout the slides. But I will try to remember to tell you which one is which. I didn't realize that I wasn't doing that until just today. I'm so sorry. All right, so let's get going. Social media. Let's talk about how social media is different from just like the internet. So let's start out with the idea of networked technology. So networked technology is a series of devices connected together and able to share data. So the telegraph was a networked technology. The telephone was a networked technology. Computers on the internet are a networked technology, right? So any set of devices that are connected together that can share data of any kind. Radios are a networked technology as well, okay? Televisions are not a networked technology because you cannot send information back. So maybe, no. So televisions are not. Some gaming consoles are, perhaps, but definitely like normal TVs aren't. Because you can't send information back, you can't share data out, you're just receiving it in. But radios, if you're using the radios to talk back, can be. Okay, so you have to be able to send and receive the information on it for it to be a networked technology. So that's an important point. Okay, so a social network is defined as the people that you know, right? So your social networks are the people that you know. You have a social network at college, at St. Vincent, and you have a social network at home, and those may or may not have a degree of overlap. So you might know some people at St. Vincent who are the same people that you know from home. There may be more or less overlap in that, depending on how far away from home St. Vincent is for you. When I went to college about 3.5 hours from where I grew up. And I knew, well, when I went to college, I didn't know anybody there. There was one person from my home area who was a year behind me who went to my same college. And then a couple more people who were 2 years younger than I was, who were 2 classes behind me. So 2 people who were 2 classes behind me. So I ended up knowing 3 people from my home area who went to the same college as I did. But none of them were in my class, right? So like you may have more or less overlap in different social networks that you have. Now you can have, these can be more or less specific as well, right? So like at my college, I was on the swim team, and there was only one person on the swim team who was also a communication major. And so we shared those two social networks. But there was no one who was a communication major and a graphic design major. So I had no social network overlap in between my two majors. And I had no social network overlap between my dorm and my major, or my dorm and my swim team. So there are different kinds of social networks that you have, right? All right. So if we put network technology and social network together, we get social media, which is using network technologies to build and maintain social networks. And these can be to keep in touch with the social networks you made face-to-face in person. So keeping in contact with your high school friends from your hometown when you're away at college, or keep in touch with your college friends now that you're back in your hometown. Or it can be getting to know new people who share the same hobby or the same fandom or the same interests as you online, and building a new network of people using technology who you otherwise wouldn't have known. So the main idea here is that you are using this networked technology to connect, to create and connect into a network of people in some way. And this isn't brand new. People did this with radio technology. People did this with writing letters and magazine clubs and pen pal clubs and things like that. But it has become so much easier to do it, and so much more widespread and accessible for people, that it has taken off in a way that wasn't ever really possible before maybe the last 15 years or so, certainly the last 20. So social media has become something that is quite new in humanity's experience, and we're not entirely sure how to deal with it yet. So I want you to just take a moment and think about how you use social media. I asked you a lot of these questions when we were talking about affect a couple of weeks ago, but I just want you to think through these questions. What social media do you use, and for what, and how often? And your screen time app on your phone probably can tell you most of these things. How much do you trust your social media? Do you trust some types of social media more than others? Why? What is it about a particular platform that makes you trust it more? Is it the people that you interact with there? Is it the way that the platform itself is set up? What about it changes your level of trust? We were talking about trust last class, right? What devices do you use to access this form of social media, and why do you use that particular device rather than another one? And finally, who do you interact with on this social media? I use very different social media to interact with different groups of people. In fact, I have different social networks on different social media apps, and I try to keep them fairly separate. I don't have a lot of cross-platform friendships, and I do that on purpose because I want to have kind of different spheres of my life happening in different places. Maybe you don't do that though. So I want you to think about that for a little bit. Discuss it with your best stuffed animal friend. Today, for my stuffed animal friend, I have Keone, who is a baby giraffe. Keone, I got at the Utah Zoo in Salt Lake City. we saw a baby giraffe there, and it was adorable. And so we got a baby giraffe friend there. So Keone and I are going to talk about our social media use together. So you should talk about your social media use. Keone says that she would be very happy to listen if you want to talk to her. Yeah, okay. So one of the things that makes social media use somewhat controversial in our current day and age is that we often find ourselves getting into not so much discussions as shouting matches with other people. And we also find that there's a lot of misinformation and false things and conspiracies and half-truths and a lot of people coming in and like yelling about stuff. This morning was just kind of scrolling through my social media, and one of my friends had posted that she was worried about her own pets getting COVID-19 because the Bronx Zoo had just released the news that their tigers and some of their other animals had gotten the virus, and a bunch of people in her timeline were saying that it's totally all a hoax and China manufactured this and animals can't get diseases from humans, and when are you going to wake up, and why do you believe what the news tells you, and all of this stuff. And I was just like, oh my goodness, this is so many levels of different beliefs than me, and I wouldn't even know where to start. And my friend was just like, okay, I can't science with you. And this is not an atypical interaction on social media, to just have people coming at each other from such different viewpoints, right? And trying to have conversations with each other. So one of the theories that can help us to make sense of this and also to be more careful about our interactions with other people is social judgment theory. So we're going to kind of go through that today. We're going to go through that today, but we're also going to think about how we can use it in evaluating other people's interactions with us and evaluating our attempts to persuade others in online spaces. So when we meet a message online or in person, we can choose to stick it into one of three zones or latitudes. And you can think of this kind of as a timeline, right? So actually, let me draw this. Oh, okay. Let me draw a real terrible timeline for you. This is gonna go badly because this is not a touch screen. But we want to think about this like nerp, 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 nerp. Okay, so we want to have like this. Okay, so we're gonna put acceptance. Say, yeah, I'm totally for this. But you can be like way more accepting of something, like I 100% accept this and you can never convince me otherwise. This is 100% true. It's a foundational belief that I have, and nothing that you ever do will change my mind about this. And that could be like over here, right? Or yeah, I think that's true. right? So you can have like more or less acceptance of something, or seems right, right? Versus absolutely positively, yes, I know, right? So your zone, your latitude of acceptance is a scale in and of itself. Stuff can be in your latitude of acceptance and still be pretty weakly accepted, or it could be very strongly accepted, or anywhere in between. All right, so that's what you accept as true. Your latitude of rejection is what you reject as untrue. This can be over here. That, very good, R. Okay, that works the same as the latitude of acceptance. You can have things that you just barely reject them. You think that probably they're kind of wrong. You don't care that much. Like, you don't really like lima beans and you're never going to pick them as the vegetable, but if somebody serves them to you, you're not going to pick them out and throw them away. And you're not going to make a big deal out of it. But you're never going to buy them when you go to the grocery store. All the way to no, never, absolutely not, this is the worst thing and you're never going to convince me otherwise, right? Same thing that you can have like very small, very mild rejection, all the way to like extremely strong, firm beliefs, okay? So we've got the same kind of range in rejection as we've got in acceptance. And then the third zone is undecided or no opinion. Latitude of meh is what I call it. This is not the technical term, but this is where like you don't care, or you don't know, or it doesn't affect you. You're just like, meh, whatever. It doesn't, I don't care. Okay. So you've got kind of like this spectrum of how much you care about the thing, from accepting to meh to rejecting, and it goes all the way from very strong to very strong with very weak or nothing at all in the middle. Okay. I personally think that this should be, well, okay, we're not going to go into that right now. It's not important. Okay, so the important thing is that you've got these three zones. They work like this. And when somebody says a statement to you, you have to decide an opinion. You have to decide where that opinion goes on this scale for you. So if I say to you, okay, staying inside and never going out is the best thing ever. I wish we all could live our lives like this all the time. You can be like, yeah, cha-ching, or oh my gosh, I can't even believe you right now, or I don't even know what you're talking about. I work in a grocery store and I am not staying at home. This doesn't apply to me. Right? Like there are different things that you can say, right? Or I'm not really sure what I think about that. But you have to decide your opinion, your reaction to that. All right. So there are different ways to tell how strongly you're going to react on this scale. One is your ego involvement, which is how important the issue is to you. People with high ego involvement in an issue tend to have very small or non-existent latitudes of non-commitment. So that middle section of meh, they don't have that, or that part is very, 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 very small. They have very strong, very firm opinions, pro and con. They do not have meh. They don't come in meh. They come in yes and no, the end. There are not maybes for them. I do not like to have conversations with these people very much because I like to live in maybe land. I like to live in both and. It is part of why I have an and on my wrist. And I don't like when people are just like, yes or no, those are all of the choices. And I'm like, that's not how the world works. There's so many colors, though. But when an issue is extremely important to somebody, they tend to think of it as all or nothing. You're either for me or against me, and that is it. You are either a good person or a bad person, and if you don't agree with this issue, you are a bad person. And this is when people get very worked up about things and care a lot, which can be really, really good, because if an issue really is very important, you want people to get really invested in it. You want people to really, really care. You want people to work really hard, and to sacrifice and to try to make a difference and to put a lot into it. But if people are getting this into issues that don't matter very much, then it can be significantly counterproductive and it can be a significant problem. This is one of the reasons that it can be very tiring to work with toddlers, is because for toddlers, everything is very important to them. And so whether they get to wear the shirt they wanted to becomes something that they have a very strong, firm opinion about. And whether they got to swing on the swing the number of times that they wanted, whether they got, like, everything has high ego involvement for a toddler. And so they end up being very invested in everything. And so it can be very exhausting to take care of a toddler because they care so much about everything, and that is just a tiring way to live. People with high ego involvement also have a very wide latitude of rejection. They just already think they're right about everything, and so it takes so much to convince them that they should change their mind about anything at all. They just are already sure that you're wrong before you even start talking. And so they're just going to reject everything you say without listening to you for a very long time. And it's extremely difficult to get them to listen, because they're pretty sure they're right. Otherwise, why would they be holding this opinion? Because they hold the right opinion already. Think of Sheldon Cooper on The Big Bang Theory. And they have deep passion towards the issue already. Again, this is good if the issue warrants it, but you cannot be living your life caring about every single thing this much. It is too tiring. All right, so we have established that when you encounter a message, you place it in one of the latitudes of acceptance, rejection, or meh. People's perceptions and placements, though, we can make these decisions individually, but we find with research that these decisions are altered dramatically by our group memberships. Membership in a group with a known stand on an issue almost always means high ego involvement with the issue. And the more that someone identifies with a specific group, the more that group's stance on an issue will influence the person's stance on the issue. So if I don't care about a particular issue very much, but I join a group and that group becomes very important to me and that group cares about an issue a lot, I will start to care about that issue a lot. So let's say that I don't care very much about, I don't know, saving Twin Lakes Park and doing water conservation there. But the faculty at St. Vincent College care a lot about that issue. And I care a lot about being a faculty at St. Vincent College, and I identify very strongly as a faculty member at St. Vincent College, and I find out that that's an issue that matters a lot to them, and I start to become very passionate about water conservation at Twin Lakes Park and saving Twin Lakes Park as a watershed for Westmoreland County. I'm making all of this up. I don't think there's anything going on with Twin Lakes Park and water conservation or anything like that. But then maybe I start to, go out and stand in front of the county courthouse building with signs and, making statements, and they put me on the news because I have blue hair and so I seem weird and I stand out and people will pay attention to me when they're switching channels, and right? But I wouldn't normally do that. I'm doing that at that point because my group is doing it and I care about being part of my group. And so that becomes an important issue to me because it's an important issue to my group. So we have a term for this, social judgment involvement, which is how much ego involvement affects your perception of the importance of an issue and how much specifically your group membership changes your own personal caring about an issue. And we can manipulate this in research by activating how much you feel like you're part of a group and your feelings of group membership. And I'll talk about this right after we come back from Easter break. We're going to talk about intergroup communication and how we feel like we are part of groups and what that means and what that does with the way that we communicate. But we can manipulate our feelings of groupness and group membership in a lab setting and see if they just ask me, hey, Dr. Nichols, how do you feel about water conservation and watersheds? I'll be like, I think they're important. And they'd be like, hey, will you go out and picket in front of the county courthouse next week? And I'll be like, no. Right? Whereas if they say, hey, how do you feel about being a faculty member at St. Vincent College? I'll be like, oh, that's super important to me. And they'll be like, did you know the faculty are going to be picketing because of this? I'll be like, oh, really? They'll be like, yeah. Are you going to go join them? I'll be like, probably. Right? And I will answer that question differently when I'm thinking as a group member. And that is the point here. That is what social judgment involvement is about. Okay. So there are 3 ways that you can adjust people's initial attitudes and change them to create to make them different, obviously, to influence the way that they are thinking about an issue. The first is to use contrast. Contrast is a perceptual distortion that leads to the polarization of ideas. Contrast accentuates differences. It makes things more extreme. It makes things seem more different than they really are. And contrast is a way of making people who were more in the middle get more to the edges. So it makes people who are more moderate more radical. It makes things seem like you can't be you don't have very much in common with those other guys, with the people on the other side, that they're just so different from you. Even warm messages seem cold to people who have hot opinions and vice versa. It's very much I say tomato and you say tomato, and that's just so different kind of a way of arguing. This tends to make people add more statements to their latitude of rejection, and it's a way of trying to divide people up. We hear a lot of this kind of rhetoric in political campaigns, particularly once we get past the primaries and we're in the run-up to the regular election. The second is assimilation, and this is the opposite. Assimilation is a perceptual distortion that leads to over-acceptance of ideas. So assimilation accentuates similarities and makes things seem more similar to each other than they really are. It leads to a kind of wishy-washiness that makes it so that people can't see how things are different from each other. And it makes people think that even a somewhat strong statement is actually quite close to what they really believe when that strong statement isn't. It tends to make people add more statements to their latitude of acceptance, and this can be good for getting along, but it's not very good for things like being okay with bullying or not minding hate speech or things like that. Now, the way that you can create the most change between people, or between someone's initial beliefs and their new beliefs, is by looking at their latitude of acceptance or rejection and trying to start your message there. So if you're starting with a statement that is just inside their latitude of acceptance and getting them to definitely accept it, or just inside their latitude of rejection and getting them to accept it, that will create the most change for them. The greater the difference between what they already agree with strongly and the new statement, the more their underlying attitude will change because they're shifting. And so the more you can edge into that latitude of rejection, the further you're getting them to make underlying changes that are lasting and important. But if you do this wrong, you will cause a boomerang effect where they will just pull back a lot further and be like, oh, no, and they'll double down and you will lose a lot of ground. And so this can be a very, very tricky thing to try to do, which is why it's like marketers and well, just anyone who is trying to persuade in this way has to be very careful. So here is how persuasion and social judgment theory go together. Persuasion is a gradual process. It works over time. It is a series of very small steps. It's a social process. It happens between people, between many different people. When a person is an expert, they are more persuasive. And even though people are always yelling that people don't believe in experts anymore, people still believe in experts. Ambiguity can serve better than clarity in a lot of situations. When you are trying to persuade, And some people are just dogmatic on every issue. Some of them are just Sheldon Cooper, and that's how it works. The best persuaders, though, know their audience well and tailor their message to them and what they care about and how they're going to react to it. So let's put these two things together. Let's talk about social judgment and networked media. Arguing with people on the internet doesn't work if you use your strongest arguments first. That causes boomerang. And you know how a boomerang works? It comes back and hits you in the face. Well, for you, probably you catch it, but it would hit me in the face. So to be persuasive online, you want to nudge people to change their attitude just a little, one step at a time. The idea of social judgment persuasion is that you move them one step today, and then another step tomorrow, and then another step next week, and eventually they move a lot. All right, so let's finish this off. Your homework for this today is to turn in Media Tracking 11 about study habits. That should already be done. And you're going to do Media Tracking 12, where you are going to take a piece of media and track the way that your latitudes of acceptance and rejection and meh are moved by the arguments in that piece of media. I know that this sounds weird and maybe hard. I have given you a number of different examples for you to be able to see how other students have approached this assignment in the past. So that should be able to help you out. You should also begin your media paper draft, and on Wednesday there is no lecture, there is no reading. You have the whole day just to work on your media paper. So make sure you check out the media paper draft assignment and work on that on Wednesday. And I will see you after Easter. Have a great day and don't touch anybody else's face.